Good afternoon, class, and welcome to week 3. I'm very happy that I could join you and communicate with you this afternoon. I hope all of you had a wonderful Martin Luther King holiday. And remember, the reason for the holiday was to be thankful and grateful for the work of Dr. King and allowing us to have all the freedoms and access to be able to live in our communities. Well, today I'm touching base with you with week 3. We finished week 2 last week, and you were supposed to complete a discussion 2, quiz 1 from last week. I noticed some of you still have not done that yet, so I please encourage you to get that in if you have not. Okay. Last week, I encouraged you to read chapters 1 through 5. That really was for the first 2 weeks of the class. And today we're going to be looking at chapters 6, 7, and 8. Okay. Chapters 6, 7, and 8 is what we're going to be looking into today. And basically, this has to do with counseling, pastoral counseling, and how we listen to the counselees as they're talking to us, as they're giving us information. And what we're going to be looking into today is basically reflective feedback. Reflective feedback has to do with how we listen to the person and how we respond to what the person is saying, okay? Because it's a big difference between listening and hearing. Some of us, we hear somebody, but it really takes more skill to listen to what the person is saying and giving them a positive feedback on what they're saying. That's one of the roles of a counselor and as a minister. Many people will come to you and ask you and tell you problems and situations that's going on, and you have to spiritually interpret what the person is saying. One person might say, well, this is what's going on in my marriage, and you have to really understand why, what are the issues behind why that person is saying that about their marriage, their spouse, their children. Sometimes people come to ministers when it comes to making decisions. Sometimes in their mind, they know what they want to do, but they need somebody to validate it to help them. Okay. So this afternoon, we're going to be looking at chapter 6. And chapter 6 really talks about validating emotions because everything that we do and say deals with emotions. Everybody has emotions. Emotions is basically not just what the person does, but it has to do with how the person feels. And on a normal day, whether you're at work, you're at school, you're at church, people are always showing their emotions, how they feel. Sometimes the emotions can be what the person says and how they act can show you how their emotions are. Someone can be laughing with you and making jokes with you, but inside of them, they're going through something, and you can see it by the way they're acting and stuff. So in chapter 6, the author talks about basically reflective feelings. Okay, reflective feelings have to do with, as the book says here in chapter 6, page 112. It says it's a skill that allows the counselee to begin to feel heard, understood, and known by the counselor. So the information you're seeing in chapter 6 has to do with how we interpret how people feel. Okay, people want to feel like they've been heard. Okay, and what I mean by heard, not only did you hear what they said, but you understand how and why they've said the same things that they've said. It's just like a marriage, a husband and a wife. Sometimes they might have something to say, and what is said and what is being interpreted could be two different things. Okay, so the role of the counselor is to understand, okay, and to feel what is being said and understand it in a professional and spiritual manner. Okay, so the skill that we see here is reflective feeling. You see this on the screen. And the purpose to reflect back the explicit emotions of the counselee. So after this person has shared everything with you about him or her issues, you want to be able to reflect back on what the person is saying. That's what we're going to be doing in chapter 6. I know we're not in a physical class, basically, where we could come in class and role play this. But these things that you see in the chapters ahead, I encourage you to find a way to role play them at home or with a colleague, or For example, chapter 6, next time you're talking to somebody, try to reflect on what they're feeling, okay? Basically, chapter 6, as the PowerPoint says, reflective feeling is not agreeing with the person. So if the person is saying, for example, I'm dumb, okay? You as a counselor are not supposed to say, yes, yes, I agree with you. Yes, I agree with you. That's not what you're doing, okay? You're not agreeing with what the person is saying. But what you're doing is, as we're going to see in chapter 6, is something else. Not proving. Reflective feeling has nothing to do with proving right or wrong. It has to do with listening and understanding what the person is saying and explaining in such a way that the person begins to see it for themselves. It's not imposing feelings. So you're not going to impose or come into that person and say, oh, this is what you're saying, or this is how you're feeling, or this is what I think you're trying to say. Basically reflecting back what the person says. Not so much how you as a counselor feel the person feels. You understand what I'm saying? The formula for reflective feeling, the author talks about this. What is the formula? The formula for reflective feeling sounds like you feel, okay? So basically, after you've spoken with this person and the person has spoken with you and you've heard the person and spiritually you feel like God is connecting you to what the person's saying, you're going to say, oh, you feel this, okay? So for example, talking to my wife, she might say, oh, I'm tired. It's like, and saying, when she's saying she's tired, it's really saying, oh, you feel like you need more help in the house. Hey, as a husband, oh, you need more help. Okay, that's what you mean by tired. Okay, so you feel this. Now, reflective feelings can be, as the author says, addictive. Often includes implicit underlying feelings or additional commentary, such as the explanation for the counselee's emotion. So by additive, the word additive is basically the counselor is adding or stating or reflecting back on what the person is really saying or giving commentary. I like that word. Okay. I'm going to comment on what I believe you're feeling. That's what you're doing with reflective feeling. It's comparable. Accurately identifies effective synonym for the counselor's communicating from. It could be subtractive, minimize or completely ignores the counselor's emotion. So what we're seeing here is basically identifying what the reflective feeling can be. By subtractive, you might be listening to somebody and you just tell them exactly what they're saying, okay? But then you miss the ball. You miss really interpreting what the person is really feeling. I've had situations where people would tell me in my church setting, I said, well, we can't afford to pay you right now. And the person was like, yeah, Pastor, that's not a problem. But later on, it turns out the person really wanted something anyway, And I've had to, for example, as they say, what? When you say no, it means yes, and yes means no. Okay? So it's kind of the same thing. You're interpreting what somebody's saying, what they're feeling, and so forth, So this is very important to know as a counselor, Christian counselor. Okay? So there are some things that the book talks about here. This was just my PowerPoints. We see here a counselor needs to be able to help the counselee acknowledge and sit even with the most negative emotions. So as you're doing reflective feeling, you got to help the person identify whatever negative emotions that he or she might be feeling. Okay. Sometimes people come to you and they feel discouraged, and you got to find out why. Does Johnny or Mary have this discouragement? What caused him to do that? So that's what reflective feeling does. Then we see here in the chapter 113, a counselee will communicate both explicit and implicit feelings. Explicit expressions of emotions when the counselee directly states what was or feelings. When the person's talking to you, they're going to either directly say, man, I'm discouraged. But then another way, they might say something to you where they don't go directly to state the problem, but you, as a reflective listener, you're going to basically by reading the nonverbal and the verbal cues to see what the person is really feeling. You know, in my situation where sometimes I'm going through stuff as a pastor, and someone will come to me and say, "Pastor, you look stressed." But I never really said I was stressed. But I guess by my actions, my words, even in my sermon, someone can pick up the ideas that the pastor is stressed. Okay? So that's why all those things are important for us to know. Now, reflective feeling, one of the things that I see, the author kind of emphasized many things. It gives you a biblical theological connection. And one of the things that it shows is that how Jesus was able to reflect on feelings of different individuals in the Bible. We see that with the Samaritan woman. We see that with many others, where Christ was able to understand what the person was feeling. Okay, so that's why this reflective feeling is so important. Now, one of the things that we see on page 130 is reflective feelings and cross multiculturally from different cultures. This is going to be hard as a counselor, especially if you're at a church that has a variety of people, or you're working somewhere where someone has a different culture. Not every culture where someone's going to express their feelings the same way. Some people, when their feelings might seem cold because they've never learned, their culture taught them not to show feelings. Okay, and that's why it says it's more difficult in certain cultures to express feelings. Okay, so that's one of the things. That's why you have to practice it in different settings to really understand what people are feeling and why they're acting a certain way. Okay, there's a ministry application on here when it comes to reflective feelings. So I want you to get into the book and read this on page 122. And really, I love the way how the book has, for example, page 121, 122. These are great, great practices that you can do. This could be part of your journal. You guys have been asking me about journals, and as I said, you're really putting whatever you've learned in the chapter into a one-page journal. So you can probably put a practice like this on there and write this down and practice it. So later on, when you're counseling somebody, you can do this. Moving on to chapter 7. Chapter 7 talks about it. Again, it goes back to feelings in chapter 7. And let me just put this up here on the screen. You're going to see chapter 7 notes on here, just like how I had for chapter 6 and then chapter 8. Okay. And I also have 3 videos that I have posted for you to review for the week. And it's really going to engage you. It's going to show you how another counselor is practicing reflective feelings. Empathy is another skill that you have to learn as a counselor. Okay. Many of us, same thing with feelings in chapter 6. We really need to know how to sense what people are feeling, especially in the ministry setting. Okay. As a pastor, I've had situations where someone would talk to me in my office, and just by listening to them, I'm interpreting what the person is feeling, but also their behaviors, the nonverbal cues are showing me there's something else going on besides what he or she is saying. So chapter 7 talks about empathy, and it's a very important skill for ministers and leaders to have and to know. It's not always being directive and firm, but sometimes you gotta sense the person who's talking to you. Empathetic reflection. The purpose is to build relationships with counselors so that they feel heard holistically and better understand their own situations. You hear that? That's the role of us as counselors. I like the last part was to understand their own situation. So 90% of the time, the person will come to you and he or she might not even understand what's going on. And it's your job to help them, okay? So it's really a big thing. Basically, the formula we have, you feel, a feeling word because. So we go deeper into from chapter 6 to chapter 7. As I listen, I sense you're feeling this because of this. That's the purpose of this in chapter 7. Chapter 7, the definition for empathy is the ability to sense the client's private worlds as if it were your own, but without losing the as if quality. So in chapter 7, it's basically you're putting yourself in the person's shoes as you're listening and you're reflecting on what the person is saying, you're kind of understanding, oh, why does Johnny feel this way? Or why is Mary talking like this? You're beginning to experience them in such a way where, in a way, it does become personal. But really, you can't make it personal because you're not trying you're not trying to really be that person, but you're listening to that. Okay. So there are two kinds of empathy. There's cognitive, which has to do with the head, and affective empathy. Okay. The first one has to do with head. Now remember, empathy that is only felt or understood internally by the counselor is not expressed in the same way. In some way, it's not empathy in the eyes of the counselor. So basically, you know, now there are different levels of this, as the author talks about in chapter 7. Level 1 is hurtful to the therapeutic relationship and is directly or indirectly tells the counselee that the counselor is not listening, does not respect the counselor, or understand the feelings. So this level, basically, you're listening to the person, but you're not grasping how the person is feeling and what they're saying. So you want to be careful that you never stay in level 1 where maybe the person is listening, you're not paying attention, there's no eye contact, you're not giving reflective feelings to understand how the person is feeling or behaving. Okay, so you want to be careful that you really make sure you understand the person that's talking to you. Level 2, in some way we miss the mark of what the counselee has communicated, but it's not as harmful as level 1. So in level 2, this area, level 2, is basically you begin to hear what the person is saying, but there's always going to be something that you miss. And sometimes you might miss that small thing because you're listening to the person and you're texting someone in your phone, or someone comes in your office and talks to you and just shift your mind and you totally forget about what the person said. Okay, you really want to focus on what he or she is saying before you. That means you got to put the phone away, you got to turn off the computer, you got to put a sign on the door, or for example, if you're talking to a person in the parking lot of your church, you want to make sure you give that person your undivided attention, because you don't know why or he or she felt propelled to come to you as a counselor or minister to share personal information. Okay, so you want to give them your attention. Level 3 accurately reflects the counselee's feelings and content without adding or subtracting what has been communicated. I love this. So when you give attention, you do reflective feeling, you're able to communicate exactly what the person is saying. So what this is saying, this last part, is don't add more words to what the person said to you. Okay? Don't add more. Okay? You're just reflecting on them, but you're not adding more. No, the person might say something and then you put more sentences, more illustrations in it, and cause the person to be confused, especially when it comes to relationship issues as people share stuff with you. Level 4 and 5 goes beyond what the counselor has stated and will be covered in chapter 9. So you'll see that. So the formula for chapter 7 is you feel because. Oh, John, you feel that school is hard because you've never taken 4 or 5 classes at the same time. Oh, Mary, you feel that your husband does not love you because he's not giving you attention. Oh, Mr. Carl, you feel that your wife is not giving you attention because she works at night. Okay, so these are different scenarios and issues that you role play them. Okay, so you listen and then you kind of reflect on what the person is saying, and that helps the person. A lot of times it really does help somebody because the person doesn't even know why they feel a certain way. You've ever been there? One day you wake up and you just feel mad and upset. You don't even know why you feel that way. You ever been there? We've all have. You after 8 hours of sleep and you get up and you just get mad. That is abnormal to me. Sometimes it's really spiritual. Sometimes you really have to pray, as you wake up, so that the enemy does not attack you spiritually, because he knows if he can destroy your emotions and get you mad and upset, it can ruin your day, and it can also affect somebody else that you would meet throughout the day. Okay, so that's one of the things to be mindful of. Empathy is not sympathy. It's not being sympathetic with people. Oh, I feel sorry for you. Oh, poor child. No, that's not what you're doing. You're not here to make people feel sorry for people. You're here to build them up. I love how it says in Ephesians chapter 4, verse 13, the last part, it says ministers are to build up the body of Christ. So my job as a minister is to build up leaders in my church that I feel like God wants to use to do something greater for his kingdom. You know? So I'm not being sympathetic. I can hear you out, but I'm going to try to encourage you and help you to see greater things in the future as a minister and a counselor. It's not agreement, okay? It's not agreement. If somebody comes and tell you, oh, I'm dumb, I'm stupid, I'm never going to be nothing, you don't agree with that person. If somebody tells you, oh, my marriage will never work out, you're not supposed to agree with that person. You're supposed to help them find hope, find a solution to the problem that they have. It's not a question, okay? And so forth. You see what it's not. Some notes about using empathy. Empathy may not be well suited for dealing with a crisis. Now, there are going to be some individuals in church or in the counseling session who will have a serious problem, okay? I like to say situations where there's abuse, okay? Anytime somebody comes to you and tell you about some type of physical abuse, you pick up the phone and call 911 if you have to. But, there are situations where you have to be very mindful and careful as a counselor, as a minister, not to give the person the wrong advice. Empathy with highly emotional counselors maybe exaggerate the situation. There will be some people who are very emotional. No matter how you try to help them find their place, their minds will be totally out of it. So you got to be very careful about that. Sometimes people might even add more into the story. They might even add more to the problem, to make it sound worse than what it is. That's why reflective feelings is important, because you really try to pinpoint what the person is saying. Using empathy to reflect on the here and now relationship can be both powerful and vulnerable. Empathy is a whole life skill, benefiting our relationship, not just their. So it goes with the whole life of the person. It helps the person to see he, she, what's going on. Okay. Giving out empathy in one relationship without receiving empathy in another can cause a counselor burnout. Be very careful. Basically, you can get burned out by always trying to feel people, understanding people, and then you do it for one and you do it for the other. Okay. So you got to be very selective of how you use the skill. Okay. True empathy is never manipulative. It's always used for the counselor's benefit. Never use it to manipulate people or try to make them change or do anything like that. You're always doing it to help the person, to see he or she, help them understand what's going on. Okay, so you always want to do that. Okay. Again, when you look at chapter 7 in the text, the author really talks about how to use this, and it gives you many levels and stuff, and it gives you roles, it gives you examples of this. I really want you to review this, okay? To see how these things can really help you out. As I said before, you could really add this into your notes, your journal. Review the relationship section of the text, page 142. Review 143, multicultural application. Okay. Also review where it says the ministry application for this. All right. Has wonderful examples here. Moving along, we see chapter 8. And chapter 8 class, the very last part is zeroing in. And let me just pull up my notes here so we can see what chapter 8 is about. All right. Chapter 8, zeroing in. And this is another important concept that we see here. Basically, zeroing has to do with clarifying. and the purpose to help facilitate the counselee's deepening understanding of his or her story. Now, reflective was always listening, telling the person what they feel. Chapter 8 is telling them why they feel like that. But here in chapter 9, we're clarifying everything, bringing it down. So the farmers tell me more about it. Okay. So after you've identified what's going on and the reason because, then you can start asking questions. What is this content about that makes you feel this certain way? So the key words are here. Tell me more about it. Okay. You've told the person, hey, I hear you saying this because of this, but now I want you to tell me more about that feeling. Okay. What's going on in that marriage? What's going on in the work? What's going on with your kids? How are you managing your house situation? What is it that's really discouraging you, making you feel suicidal? I'm just giving different examples here, class. But it really does help to really think about this, okay? I'm speaking as a minister and also a counselor. So there's some open questions you could ask the person, okay? There's open questions and closed questions. That's what chapter 8 says. You invite elaboration, okay? Now, the difference between open-ended and closed questions, and the open question, you're really allowing the person to give more details, okay? But if you're asking the person a closed question, which could be a single word or yes or no, for example, an open question is like, how's your day going? What is it? How has your day made you feel joyful or happy? Now the person can answer, okay? If you say, are you happy today? The person's going to say yes or no. That's a closed-ended question, okay? So you want to be very careful about how you phrase those questions. And open questions begin with words like how, what, or what in what ways. So you kind of open the door for the person to spend more time elaborating. But if you do something like, you see these keywords here, it can shut it. Now, there are cautions in chapter 8. Limit your questions. You want to make sure that you don't ask too many questions at the same time, okay? Be careful and pick questions that are really going to take the person deeper to explain the issue, the content of what's going on. Don't force questions, okay? Don't force the person to respond to a question. Give them time to respond. Sometimes they need a few minutes to really think about what they're thinking, what they're going to say. So be mindful of those type of things. And always make sure the question doesn't lead them in the wrong way, all right? Now, clarifying is not becoming a detective. As a detective, police detective, it's not really, you keep asking 100 questions to see why, It might be maybe you ask 1 or 2 questions to kind of understand how the person is feeling of what's going on. It's not chasing rabbit tails being a detective. It's not action-oriented. It's not inserting your opinion. Remember, the counselor's work is not to give opinions, okay? You're really responding to how the person is saying and what they're feeling, okay? So that's the end of chapter 8 slides. And basically, you have to read chapters 6, 7, and 8 for the week. And so all has to do with feelings, content, and clarifying. The feelings, chapter 6, the content, chapter 8, the feelings, chapter 6, the content, chapter 7, the clarifying, chapter 8, okay? And I'm sure if you really engage yourself this week in the studies, you will really understand the role of the counselor in the ministry setting, at the church, or at a professional. And as you continue to take counseling courses, it will really help you to understand better what you're doing as a counselor, The Bible calls all of us to be ministers and counselors, class. So there are different levels, okay? A professional level might require higher education, but as ministers, we all are called to counsel people. So after times in ministry, when people come to accept Christ as their Savior, they require counseling in order to help them be better at it. So for the week, read chapter 6, 7, and 8. You also have a discussion post for the week, and there's going to be a quiz. Next week, you have to do your annotated biography, okay? And basically, that is something I'm going to post here for you. Let me try to find something here, class. Okay. I'm trying to put my notes here to see if I can find my noted biography for you right before I leave. All right, I'm gonna post this up in a separate note once I find it, and I'll put a copy of this online so you can understand what you're doing. Well, anyway, it was a pleasure talking with all of you this afternoon, and we're definitely. If you have any questions, please let me know. I wish you all the best and enjoy your wonderful cold week, as God has blessed us with this cold holiday or week season. May God be with you. If you have any questions, please email me at pjules@uftl.edu.com. God bless and be safe out there.